You've seen the headlines, you've heard the talking points. California, the fifth largest economy on the planet, the innovation capital of the world, the land of year-round sunshine and second chances. They've been selling you that story for decades. And look, parts of it are still true, but here's what they're not telling you. Right now, in 2026, the people who actually live in California, the teachers, the nurses, the firefighters, the young professionals, the families who built their lives there, they are leaving, not trickling out, not gently relocating, leaving at a rate that has made California dead last on the U-Haul National Migration Index for 6 consecutive years in a row. 6 years. In 2025 alone, the state recorded a net loss of approximately 216,000 residents to other states. That followed 240,000 the year before that, and the year before that. Since 2001, and this number should stop you cold, California has lost residents to other states every single year. Not a recent problem, a 2-decade problem that nobody in Sacramento will say out loud at a press conference. So today, we're going to do what the locals have been doing in their kitchens and their group chats and their moving trucks. We're going to be honest about why people are actually leaving California in 2026. Let's start with the one that everyone knows but nobody fully grasps the scale of: housing. The cost of a home, an apartment, a room in a shared house in California has become something that defies rational explanation. The Federal Bureau of Economic Analysis released figures showing that California's cost of living in 2024 was the highest of any state in the country, nearly 11% above the national average. Rental housing in California is 53% above the national average. Utilities are 63% above the national average. But those are the blunt summary numbers. Let's get specific. To afford the average fair market rent on a 2-bedroom apartment in California without spending more than 30% of your income on housing, the basic standard for financial stability, you need to earn $49.61 an hour. That's the housing wage, not for a luxury apartment, not in Pacific Palisades. The average 2-bedroom, $49.61 an hour. Meanwhile, 70% of Californians say their income is not keeping up with inflation. The Bay Area has the worst financial anxiety in the state. And here's the kicker. The Public Policy Institute of California found that only 23% of California households could qualify for a mortgage on a median-priced home in 2025, down from 35% just 6 years ago. 3 out of 4 Californians cannot buy a home in the state they live in. That is not a housing market. That is a locked door with a sign that says "residents only," and then quietly removes most residents from the list. Now let's talk about what this housing crisis is actually doing to real people, because the numbers are one thing, but the lived reality is something else. A recent survey by joint venture Silicon Valley found that 40% of Santa Clara County residents said they are likely to leave in the next few years. That's Silicon Valley, the epicenter of the wealth that everyone associates with California's success. 40% of the people living at the heart of that wealth are planning their exit. A local expert in that same survey put it in terms that are impossible to argue with. Where are the teachers going to live? The firefighters? If everything requires a $500,000 salary, society starts to unravel. That quote is not from a conservative think tank. It's from a researcher analyzing the Bay Area's own data. And it captures something that the migration statistics can't fully communicate. California is not just losing residents. It's losing the people who make daily life function: the nurses, the bus drivers, the early childhood educators, the restaurant workers, the mechanics. When they leave, what remains is an economy that increasingly serves only those who can afford to be there. And even some of those people are starting to do the math and walk away too. Here's where it gets interesting, because the income profile of people leaving California has shifted dramatically. It used to be that high earners stayed and lower income residents left. That is no longer the case. According to the Public Policy Institute of California, the state now experiences net losses among higher income households in addition to middle and lower income households. Everyone is leaving now. The IRS tracked $24 billion in taxpayer income that left California in a single recent year, the largest income loss from domestic migration of any state in the country. Over the decade from 2011 to 2021, the total was $102 billion in net adjusted gross income gone to other states. The destinations tell the story plainly: Texas, Nevada, Arizona, Florida. Tennessee, states with zero income tax. California's personal income tax tops out at 13.3%, the highest rate in the United States. Corporate tax sits at 8.84%, compared to zero in Texas and Wyoming. Sales tax runs at 7.25% as a base rate, and in some counties it exceeds 10%. You can argue about what those taxes fund and whether they're worth it. But you cannot argue with the revealed preference of 216,000 people who left last year and the hundreds of companies that followed. Oracle, Palantir, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Charles Schwab, Chevron, Tesla, SpaceX. More than 200 companies have relocated out of California since 2019, the most of any state. And when companies leave, they don't just take the executive salaries. They take the entire economic ecosystem that surrounded them. Let's talk about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention because it became impossible to ignore after January 2025. The insurance crisis. California is burning, literally and figuratively, and the state's homeowners insurance market has essentially collapsed for a massive portion of the population. In January 2025, the Los Angeles wildfires killed 29 people, forced tens of thousands to evacuate, and destroyed more than 12,000 structures. AccuWeather estimated total damages between $250 and $275 billion. That is the costliest wildfire disaster in American history. But here's the thing. Before those fires destroyed those homes, the insurance industry had already abandoned the neighborhoods. State Farm, California's largest home insurer, had dropped more than 1,600 policies in Pacific Palisades alone in July 2024, 6 months before the fires arrived. Allstate pulled back. Farmers pulled back. Thousands of homeowners in the exact neighborhoods that burned had already been forced off private insurance and onto California's FAIR Plan, the state's insurer of last resort, or had simply gone uninsured entirely. One homeowner captured the entire situation in a single sentence while standing in front of her elderly parents' burning property with a garden hose. They got cancelled from their fire insurance. They've lived in this house for 75 years, and they wonder why people leave California. Between September 2024 and December 2025, enrollment in the FAIR Plan surged 43%. State Farm then received an emergency rate increase approval in May 2025 to raise rates on roughly 1 million homeowner policies by an average of 17%. More than 10% of California homeowners now have no fire insurance at all, and the insurance reforms that were supposed to fix this? A senior program officer at United Policyholders described the current situation directly. The reforms are a long game, and that really hurts for the homeowner, for the insurance consumer, because they're not seeing the relief that was promised. You can build a beautiful life in California. You just might not be able to insure it. So here's the question that locals are actually asking in 2026. What is the quality of daily life actually like? Not for the venture capitalist in Atherton or the AI founder in Soma, for the average person. And the answer, depending on where you are in the state, ranges from genuinely difficult to functionally untenable. Los Angeles commuters lose an average of 81 to 100 hours a year sitting on freeways. The city contains 4 of the top 10 most congested highways in the world. California consistently ranks as the most polluted state in the country. 6 of the 10 most polluted cities for year-round particle pollution are in California, with Fresno topping the list nationally. The state's infrastructure received a grade of C- from the American Society of Civil Engineers, with deteriorating roads, bridges, and public transit called out explicitly. And underneath all of it, the layer that defines the street-level experience in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and dozens of other cities across the state is the homelessness crisis. California has roughly 11% of the nation's population and 28% of the nation's homeless. That ratio hasn't fundamentally changed in years. The January 2025 point-in-time count documented 187,084 people experiencing homelessness on any given night in California. Tens of thousands of them are families with children. The governor celebrated a 9% drop in unsheltered homelessness in parts of the state in 2025. And to be fair, that is real progress after years of little movement. But 9% improvement when you hold 28% of the national homeless population is not a solution. It is one step in a very long walk that California has been putting off for a generation. Let's be real about what's driving this at the structural level, because the California that people are leaving is not the same as the California that failed to build enough housing in the 1990s or underfunded its schools in the 2000s. This is a California facing compounding systemic failures that are feeding each other. The housing crisis drives homelessness. The homelessness crisis degrades quality of life in urban centers. Degraded urban quality drives businesses and residents out. Businesses and high earners leaving shrinks the tax base. A shrinking tax base creates budget deficits. Budget deficits mean cutting the services that the remaining residents depend on. And the state has been in structural deficit for 3 consecutive years. $27 billion in 2023 to 24, $55 billion in 2024 to 25, another $12 billion hole in 2025 to 26, patched with internal borrowing and reserve withdrawals, heading toward a projected $18 billion deficit in 2026 to 2027, and potentially $35 billion annually by 2027 to 2028. California finances itself almost entirely on taxing the capital gains and income of wealthy earners, who make up a tiny slice of the population and whose fortunes rise and fall with the stock market. Personal income tax represents nearly 70% of California's general fund revenue. The national average is 38%. So the state that is losing its wealthiest residents the fastest is also the state most dependent on those residents for its fiscal survival. That is not irony. That is a slow-motion structural collapse. And here is what the locals, the ones who have stayed and the ones who have left, will actually tell you when you ask them why. It's not one thing. It's never one thing. It's the lease renewal letter that arrives with a $400 increase and no warning. It's the neighbor who got their insurance cancelled in July and watched their house burn in January. It's the 4-hour round-trip commute to a job that used to be a 20-minute drive before traffic became the defining feature of daily life. It's the teacher earning $65,000 a year, looking at $4,350 monthly mortgage payments, and deciding that Arizona or Texas or Tennessee just makes more mathematical sense. It's the startup founder who runs the numbers and realizes their burn rate is 40% higher in San Francisco than it would be in Austin for the same talent pool. It's the retiree who cannot get their home insured for any amount and decides the risk of staying is no longer worth it. It's the family that came to California with a dream and discovered that the cost of that dream has inflated faster than any raise, any promotion, any hustle could match. Almost 60% of Californians have considered leaving, according to recent surveys. 1 in 3 cite housing costs as their primary motivation. The U-Haul data, the IRS data, the census data, the Stanford research, the Public Policy Institute analysis, they all tell the same story from different angles. California is not broken beyond repair. Its geography is still extraordinary. Its innovation culture is real. The AI boom reshaping San Francisco is genuine, but none of that rebuilds the life of the teacher who left for Phoenix because she could finally afford a house with a yard for her kids. None of it changes the math for the young couple in Los Angeles looking at a $900,000 starter home and a $5,000 a month rent as their only 2 options. The question for California in 2026 isn't whether it has a future. It absolutely does. The question is whether that future includes the people who built it. And right now, far too many of those people are packing up U-Haul trucks and answering that question themselves.